Episode 261, Seymour Fukuoka Mollison and MacKenzie. This is the Change Underground for the 21st of June 2021. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. This week I'm taking a look back at my literary mentors in the smallholding horticulture field. It turned out I finally managed to get to the library to ask about self-sufficiency books the day after The Good Life first aired on Australian TV back in 1977. I hadn't heard of it, let alone watched it, but the librarian alerted me to it, a romanticised version of backyard self-sufficiency, but with some useful ideas. She did, though, also point me towards John Seymour's complete book of self-sufficiency, link in the show notes. This particular work has been through a few editions. I much prefer the earlier to the latter ones. The earlier editions are broken into logical units, food from the fields, gardens, animals, the wild, and so on. The new editions have rearranged these areas into a less obvious and I think less useful structure. Now, Seymour fits into a continuum stretching from antiquity to the post-World War II back to the land movement and on to contemporary regenerative efforts. In the US, Rodale is probably the closest thing to Seymour. I find Rodale's work contains a little bit too much flim-flammery for me, but I concede the Rodale Institute has done and continues to do much good research and development in the organic and sustainable fields. The Rodale style can best be explained by his passing. As a guest on the Dick Cavett show on the 8th of June 1971, where he claimed organic food was so good for people and that was all he ate and he was planning to live to 100. Later in the program, he keeled over dead from a heart attack, so not exactly the best advertisement. John Seymour promoted his work through words mostly, and very well-written words at that. Whilst he falls onto the continuum mentioned before, he was solidly into the double-dug gardens and moldboard plough school of thinking. These are but technologies and have been replaced without altering his overall message. That message, as I find it in his work, is study nature, follow nature, and look to the past for examples of farming systems that work. In his case, the high farming of the 18th century was his choice. From that high farming, he did say it was not directly translatable to his time, as it was unlikely people would be happy to live on beef, bread and beer. He does point out that people used to live quite well on this combination, but conceded its time had passed. If you can get hold of a copy or have one yourself, I'd reread the section on the Web of Life at the very beginning of the complete book of self-sufficiency. It is one of the best examples of what we are trying to mimic in our systems. 1981-2 were years of health issues for me. Following a series of invasive medical procedures, or increasingly invasive medical procedures, to be honest, which revealed nothing, I ended up undergoing hypnotherapy. This from the start was obviously a variation on meditation, as I saw it. I wandered down Zen meditation rabbit holes, and through this minimal introduction to Japanese thought processes, I discovered a little monograph on a second-hand book table, The One Straw Revolution. And with that, I had found my second mentor, Masanobu Fukuoka. Fukuoka takes the working with nature to a deeper level. I set up my first Fukuoka grain patch, but moved house before the barley ripened, so I never got to get it going fully. Life intervened until autumn this year when I managed to set up a few large gardens to try again. The grain gardens are but the most obvious example of the Fukuoka thinking, and as such seem to be the essence of the system, but there are so many more layers to his philosophy. In inverted commas, what less can I do, and inverted commas again, do nothing farming, are perhaps the greater lessons from his work. These he reached from the point of remembering farmers in his childhood, spending the winter hunting rabbits and writing poetry. When he returned from his academic studies, he saw those same farmers or their children working 12 months a year and getting poorer by the year. The main thing I gleaned from both Seymour and Fukuoka was, at the time I'd commenced studying archaeology, was that we had gone astray. We needed to dig back into the ways things were done and then move onward from there. Enter Bill Mollison. The key message I received from permaculture and from Bill was a quote in a video entitled "In Grave Danger of Falling Food." There's a link to the video in the show notes. The sound quality is a bit iffy, but it's worth persisting with. Now, paraphrasing from that video, it's great that people are trying to stop the destruction going on around us. He's talking about old growth forests and whatnot. But the biggest challenge is rejuvenating what's already been damaged. I was also chuffed to see permaculture had discovered Fukuoka. I remember reading somewhere that Fukuoka grain growing was the only way to grow grain that wasn't a soil health disaster. We may have learned other ways since then. The other step forward was Bill's consumption production quote that I've used many times, but I'll read it again here. Quote, "The greatest change we need to make is from consumption to production, even if on a small scale in our own gardens. If only 10% of us do this, there will be enough for everyone. Hence the futility of revolutionaries that have no gardens, who depend on the very system they attack, who produce words and bullets, but not food and shelter." End quote. I'm certain this still holds true. Seymour Fukuoka and Mollison I've referenced before. MacKenzie might be a new name to you, David MacKenzie in fact, and he wrote the seminal work on dairy goats for temperate climates. His major work, Goat Husbandry, has been revised and, in inverted commas, updated, as they say. Having read both the original and the newer version, I'd look for the original. There are more breeds covered in the newer editions, but you can learn about those on Wikipedia or YouTube, so that extra info is of little benefit. The original version has Mackenzie's voice clear and true. Reading his book in 1988, after the other three mentors, meant I had read through it with the eye of biomimicry. From the basics of goat husbandry to where feeding had gone wrong to individual case studies, MacKenzie walks the reader through the possibilities of goat husbandry. Truly productive animals with the intelligence at least of dogs, they are full of personality. They do have their drawbacks. Fencing is the number one issue with keeping goats. Once you've fixed that, know that you haven't, and you need to remain vigilant, but the rewards are remarkable. So from those four mentors, I developed my systems. If you'd like to start your gardening adventure and lifetime of astonishing insights, go to the website worldorganicnews.com/free ebook, and you can obtain a free copy of the ebook outlining the Change Underground no-dig gardening system. Or you can just go to the World Organic News website and click on the free ebook tab. It's up to you. If you have any questions, thoughts or suggestions, I've opened a Facebook group called imaginatively the Change Underground podcast group. You can search on the Book of Faces, or there's a link in the show notes and in the transcript over at worldorganicnews.com/episode 261. Following the website crash a month or so ago, I'm slowly adding the transcripts for the back catalogue, so thank you for your patience. And remember to decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back next week.